Hello, my name is Miguel Naranjo, and I am Program Officer with the UNFCCC Secretariat, also known as UN Climate Change. I want to thank One Carbon World for inviting us to participate in this session, and I apologize that I couldn't join live. We are in the middle of our climate change conference, COP26. Your session is on agriculture and horticulture and how it can contribute to addressing climate change. The topic of land use and land use change is a hugely important one. One of the main sources of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions that cause global warming and therefore climate change, is the change of use of our soils. It is the third biggest sector in terms of emission of greenhouse gases. But on the other hand, it's also one of the big solutions, potential solutions that we have to help us capture CO2, to help us fight the problem. The management of soil and projects of restoration of land or ecosystems is complex. It's a complex issue. I won't go into the details, but I will say that even if it is complex, it is key. We do need to restore our ecosystems and we need to manage our soils sustainably if we are going to ensure the survival of our society. The use of land, which agriculture and horticulture have a big influence on, is one of the key areas to address climate change and one of the other environmental emergencies that we are facing, which is extinction of species, both animal and vegetable. So as you can see, you, as any other sector, you have a key role to play, but maybe a more important one. Of course, agriculture and horticulture provide the food that we need to survive, but it is also part of the problem and also a big part of the possible solution. So I hope that through this session, you will be able to understand more clearly what the role of your sector is and what you can do to help transform it into part of the solution. You are not alone in this journey. Every other sector of society, every other industry is going through the same transition. We all need to move from the current practices, which are not sustainable, to those that are. So don't feel that you are alone. We are all on the same boat. What matters is that you do whatever you can to address your footprint and increase your handprint, your positive contribution, just as everybody else. With that, I hope that you have a very good session and we look forward to learning about the outcomes. Thank you very much.
So, good afternoon and welcome to this workshop, Climate Heroes on Agriculture and Horticulture sector and its role for carbon neutrality. So, my name is Carol Dana. I'm an associate professor in sustainable food systems at the University College London in the UK, and I'm hosting the session today. So why is agriculture so important for climate change, climate action? So as Miguel said in the introduction, we know that agriculture is both an important source of greenhouse gas emissions, so it contributes significantly to climate change, notably because of emissions of methane and nitrous oxide. But it's also a sector that has a huge potential to reduce, capture greenhouse gas emissions so that we can somehow compensate some of the positive emission and reach carbon neutrality. So it's contributing a lot to emissions because it's using a lot of land. More than a third of available land is covered with agriculture. It's also an important consumer of water resources. And on the other hand, it has the ability to capture carbon in the soil, and some practices have been already successful in showing in basically achieving this potential. So one important finding that comes out of scientist research, including some of the research we've done in the UK, is that to take action to reduce these carbon emissions and this climate impact of agriculture or land use, the organizations involved, including farmers, really need to understand and measure their carbon footprints. That's really the first step to be able to reduce it, and we're going to be discussing this with our panelists. So I'm honored to introduce the first panelist, Ian Mitchell, who is Technical and Procurement Director at Flamingo Group. So the Flamingo Group is a business that grows, processes and markets cut flowers, as well as produce and plants to the UK and the rest of Europe. They supply up to 1.5 billion stems to market every year, and their farms in Kenya and Ethiopia are all fair trade certified. They employ more than 20,000 people globally, and they have invested over 10 million in community projects in Africa with fair trade over the last decades. So we'll hear now from Ian.
Flamingo Horticulture Kenya is an export agribusiness that grows, processes, distributes and markets premium flowers and vegetables for customers in the European Union and Great Britain. We are at the heart of Flamingo Horticulture International, a vertically integrated agribusiness with an unrivaled network of preferred supply partners.
We're currently on Ibis Farm, which is 225 hectares of vegetable production, 100 hectares of flower production. We have 3 farms in the North Saraji, which is 55 hectares, 27 of which is high altitude rose production. And in 2020, we rented 2 new farms, Timau Gardens and Farm 4, a further 40 hectares of flower production.
We are on Kingfisher Farm, where we do both veg and flowers. The whole farm is actually 960 hectares gross from fence to fence. It's actually located 22 kilometers south of Naivasha town.
As Flamingo, giving back to the community is the good thing to do. We have a school feeding program and we prepare soup for 2,000 pupils every day using the excess vegetables which we don't send to the customers.
Most of the pupils in this school don't carry lunch, so when they take the soup, we will all be equal and they'll not have that feeling like I'm not one of the pupils in this school.
I always have a good feeling to know the kind of lives I've touched. Locally, for the workers, that improves their livelihoods. And for those very many customers thousands of kilometers away, where Flamingo Horticulture flowers brings joy, happiness to families, for people I would otherwise never have had a chance to touch if I was doing something different.
Flamingo Horticulture Limited, making a difference in horticulture every day.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ian Mitchell. Thank you, Carol. I'm Group Technical and Procurement Director for Flamingo Group International, and I've had the pleasure of working for Flamingo actually for 25 years this year. I hope you enjoyed the video. You saw from my colleagues in Africa highlighting that some of the key attributes to show that Flamingo Group International is about making a difference in horticulture every day. As Carol mentioned, we're an increasingly vertically integrated horticultural business that grows, processes, markets, cut flowers and premium produce and plants now to its blue chip retail customers in the UK and across Europe. This year we achieved 1.7 billion stems to market from our fair trade certified farms in Kenya and Ethiopia. And currently we employ just over 22,000 people, and we've invested heavily in the community since our projects began just over 10 years ago in Africa through fair trade projects. We started our journey sustainable business back in the late 90s, which we called it then doing the right thing. And it's in our farming business and communities that we operated in Kenya in the very early years. We were founder members of the Kenya Flower Council, a good agricultural practice program, and community groups such as Lake Naivasha Growers Group. This set the scene for us as a business and made a sustainability part of our company today, and also still stays as our part of our DNA, and also part of the culture we choose to operate in. We worked in the early days with our customers on key plans and features like Plan A, and that has established a way of doing business profitably, investing in people, communities, and long-term farming models that remain core to our principles. Our vision of a business and communities thriving in a future that is environmentally sustainable and socially just. And we're very pleased to be able to state that our vertically integrated business from Kenya and Ethiopia through our distribution network to all of our sites in UK and Europe have been carbon neutral since 2020. But another journey has now started to now try and capture it in a wider supply chain.
Thank you so much, Ian. I think it was really interesting to see this video and your comments right now, because we see that it's not just about carbon neutrality, and there is so many dimensions in terms of impact, and even in terms of sustainability. There is the environmental sustainability, of which carbon is just one aspect, and then also social sustainability and economic sustainability, of course, that businesses care about. So we can talk, it would be great to hear your thoughts on that. But first, to keep the focus on today's topic, could you please tell us about the ways that your business is reaching carbon neutrality and what you have learned along the way?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we've been involved in the business for a number of years, 20 or 25 years plus. And in the early days, it's all about collaboration with others. We were fortunate to be involved in a number of key projects like the Mauritius Navasha Group, where we worked with Prince Charles's team and the Kenyan government to lead in a water management program for protection of the resources of Lake Navasha water basin. If some of you remember, maybe back in 2007 to 2009 was very dry. But this demonstrated that we could do things, we couldn't always do things on our own. We needed to have many other people along the way to make the impact greater. Also taking many small steps at first rather than large strides to ensure that the culture and the people understand what your end goal is and what it's all about. I mentioned from some earlier people today that actually mentioned exactly the same thing, that actually taking your culture and your people together is very important. Saving water in LED lights and variable speed pumps in the early days seemed very low, seemed very small, but actually every little bit helps. But more importantly, where you can lead and power change, where you can really make an impact or be an advocate for change is important too. We started our IPM business, Duditech, 20 years ago, and that pioneered the use of beneficial products in horticulture in Africa. This involved exploring and finding indigenous beneficial species and leading the Kenyan government for policy change to implementation of biological products, so we could grow all of our crops using less pesticides. So it's not just about small little bits and pieces, but actually making sure you really can make an impact in the environment in total.
Right. And how do you see the impact of carbon emissions reduction on your business?
We basically are now looking at what are we going to do with our project next. I mean, we're very excited about working with One Carbon World and the Agriculture project, as you've been mentioned that today. We're part of the pilot project and developing how we will work with our current farming models in understanding the true value of carbon sequestration and the positive impact this is going to have on our carbon positive growing for the future. Rolling this out across our global supply base to develop a team of carbon farmers for the future, thus helping to mitigate our Scope 3 emissions in our wider supply chain to help us meet our new science-based targets. Alongside our current offset program with One Carbon World, we were looking to engage in projects in Ethiopia and Kenya on positive reforestation programs as part of our Flamingo Foundation. We hope to launch in next year. And this increasing our community projects, as we mentioned earlier on with our soup projects, and a wider engagement will also help offset options for the future. And we'd like this to be in regions where we are most involved with an agribusiness as well. So we actually do put something back to our local community. We've completed risk assessments in all of our global regions now. We do have 19 different global regions that we supply from around the world. And this has guided us on new growing regions for the future. And some specific crops in produce and flowers, we also need to look at different logistic methodologies for the future. We were lucky to be involved in a recently conducted collaborative project with the FCDO and a business project for global goals on sea freight. And this will be working with governments to improve faster supply channels in ports for perishable products, and also enable some products we go to travel on sea freight rather than the reliance on air freight solutions, which obviously is part of the business currently. That's our largest section of our Scope 3 emissions. Sea freight from Kenya is just 5% of the CO2 footprint compared to our air freight transit. So therefore, the solutions for the future must involve the sea freight options. And we must work technically to understand what will work for us in the future consistently.
Thank you very much, Ian. I think you answered the last question as well on the future of the supply chain, because you just mentioned shipping, but if you wanted to add just a few words on that, or we move on to the next panelist.
Maybe, Carol, we pick up after if you want. I can answer some questions maybe later on in the panel. Great.
Thank you very much. So now we move on to the second panelist, Ed Ayton, who is Sustainability and Communications Officer at Abel & Cole. So Abel & Cole is organic food delivery company. And they've also they've partnered with the UN Climate Neutral Now initiative and are carbon neutral. So we're going to hear now from Abel & Cole and
At Abel & Cole, we truly believe that all you need is less. We champion eating organic and with the seasons. Because food that's grown as nature intended has the power to save the world. That's why we make sure that shopping sustainably is as easy as can be. From reducing unnecessary packaging to pioneering alternatives to single-use plastic. Keeping carbon emissions and food miles low with our carefully planned delivery routes, or supporting the planet-friendly practices of organic growers and makers. We're making sustainable choices simple with every single shop. Combating climate change is no small feat, and our work will never be done. But together, we really can make big changes feel bite-sized. Abel & Cole. Easy organic everything.
Okay, so Ed, do you want to tell us a bit more about the mission and vision for sustainability, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Carol. It's an absolute delight to be here addressing everyone this afternoon, so thank you very much for the invitation. So, quite simply, Abel & Cole's mission is to become the most sustainable home delivery service in the UK. So, no light undertaking there. So that means basically strengthening our position of leadership in a world where reputation, integrity, and consistency are absolutely everything. So, how have we got ourselves here? Well, I think the best way for me to illustrate that is to tell you the decisions that we've stuck to, tell you the guns that we've stuck to. So the first one is our organic sourcing policy. If there is an organic certification available, we will look for it. Quite frankly, because it's the only assurance that we found with that element of legal protection of the assurance of positive environmental impact. We have and always will create long and supporting relationships with our farmers because we appreciate that organic is it's a very high bar for a lot of producers to reach. And just to preface, it's very important to note that there are a lot of good farmers out there doing really important work. Not all of them are organic, but the organic for us carries that legal protection, so it's quite an important assurance for us. Establishing those long-term relationships helps those suppliers through that process, and there are some we've been working with for 20 years and counting. And in terms of getting their products to us and out to our customers, we keep that as low impact transportation as possible. So we operate a no air freight policy, largely self-policing when it comes to kind of keeping costs down. But that's very important for us, given the impact that air freight can have. And then when we talk about getting our products out to customers, so we're one of the few that operates on a round basis. So we don't offer delivery slots for our customers. And that means that we've been able to recalculate distance between drops every day to minimise the mileage, keep the vans off the road, keep our carbon footprint to an absolute minimum. So as you can appreciate, over 33 years that we've been around, I imagine that there have been less logistically challenging alternatives that we've been tempted by. But those are the decisions that we've stuck to and will continue to.
Great, thanks. So actually, I was interested in some of the challenges you faced, and when you're saying carbon neutral, is it the delivery, or is it also the supply, or how do you connect that? And I guess we know that farming is hard to completely cut the emissions. So how do you deal with that?
So we've calculated, so when it comes to our carbon neutrality, we've taken into account scope 3 emissions as well, which was worked out to be about 85% of our carbon footprint. So to be able to get that data from our suppliers, that was reliant on setting up very long and trusting relationships. That element of trust cannot be overstated. I think the challenges that we've face? That's a really important question. And if we just look at the delivery model, for example, there's been plenty of opportunities to add innovation to our delivery model. However, we've had to be very careful. We're very protective over our delivery model, as you've probably gathered. So electrifying our fleet is a good example of a challenge that we faced. Frankly, the range offered by electric vehicles has not been sufficient for our purpose to date. Now that the vehicles are available, we found that the long lead time is a bit of a challenge. And again, being completely honest, I'm not reassured that the impact of lithium extraction has been properly addressed. But we have to balance that with the zero emission requirements of our clean van commitment, not to mention air pollution or reducing our carbon footprint. So that continues to be a challenge. Balancing packaging, the requirements of the thousands of products that we sell, with the fact that, as I'm sure a lot of people on this call are painfully aware, the UK does not yet operate a unified curbside collection policy when it comes to recycling materials. So that makes it difficult for a producer to make the right call. It makes it even trickier for a customer to make the right call with disposing packaging in the right way. So how do we as a retailer take responsibility for that without turning into a waste collection service? Challenge number 2. Arguably the biggest challenge, I think, and I doubt that I'm alone in this, is how do we maintain commerciality and growth and yet at the same time continue to reduce the impact of our business? How do we promote a reduced meat diet and yet promote and support small-scale mixed farming? How do we communicate that less but better message? I found that honesty and science are 2 very good places to start. Let's face it, if it's competitiveness that got us in this mess, maybe collaboration is part of the solution. So talk to the experts, talk to your competitors. We're pushing in the same direction, but never underestimate the importance of trust and reputation when you're building a sustainable brand.
Yes, thanks, Ed. And my last question is, what are the next steps for the near future?
Next steps. There's probably a few that I have to keep close to my chest, but eco-impact labelling, that's a big one coming down the tracks towards us. Set to probably become as important as nutritional information. So we're going to continue testing and learning. It's a very exciting trial to be a part of. So we'll continue the test and learn process, observe customer behaviour and report on that and share the knowledge. A couple of years ago, the government tasked a group of NGOs and business leaders with mapping how the UK supply chains contribute to deforestation around the world. And their first recommendation was impact reporting. So that element of transparency, you can see, has suddenly really come to the fore and become quite important. So bona fide, clear impact reporting is something that we're looking to really put our flag into. We'll continue to roll out our responsible supplier program, which is our voluntary audit that has given us enormous visibility over the impact of our value chain and helping us work with our suppliers. And I think that this word, in terms of branding, this word regenerative, I think is going to come into its own. We do need to keep looking at how do we keep capturing the imagination of the public? How do we keep affecting that behavioural change? I think that we're all painfully aware of the eroding stability of the natural world around us. So we don't want to sustain these systems that reap this damage. We need to start regenerating and repairing. So I think the word sustainability is going to need a bit of a rebrand. But yeah, there's probably a lot more in the pipeline that I'm going to have to keep a lid on. But watch this space.
Thank you very much, Ed. But don't forget collaboration. So don't keep it too long.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Great to hear from that. And now we are going to move on to the 3rd panelist. And just a reminder for the audience to please log into Slido. Just go into slido.com and enter the code that you can see on the website. Or you can also scan the QR code. And you can ask any questions to any of the panelists that we will address at the end. And also, if you're not sure yet what questions to ask, it's still nice to go there because you can see other questions and upvote those that you would like to hear the answer to as well. And maybe you'll get inspired to ask your own question. So thanks in advance for participating. And so now we are moving on to the 3rd panelist, Alejandro Cadena, who is co-founder and CEO of Caravela Coffee. It was founded in 2000. And as the name says, it's supplying coffee, and they are sorry. I think you're also carbon neutral, aren't you? But we'll hear about that in the video.
In the year 2000, we began the quest to source outstanding Latin American coffee from small-scale farmers, determined to reward passion and recognize excellence. At that time, coffee growers around the world were facing the lowest prices in history and were barely making any profit. Overall quality was decreasing as producers had no incentive to produce high-quality coffee because they were being paid the same price for their coffee regardless of quality. Coffee was just coffee, a mere commodity. Prospects of a sustainable coffee industry were slim. We soon learned that to accomplish finding outstanding coffee, we needed to be present, focusing on the people that make great coffee happen, coffee producers and roasters, while demonstrating a tireless commitment to quality, sustainability, transparency at every level, from farm to cup. We have grown and evolved since then, and despite the challenges we faced, one constant has been a commitment to our purpose: to make coffee better for everyone involved, from coffee growers to coffee consumers and everyone in between, including our planet. Collaborating with One Carbon World, this year we measured, verified, and offset 100% of our worldwide carbon emissions, becoming the world's first carbon neutral certified green coffee trading company. We are very proud of this achievement, but we cannot stop here. By 2025, we aim to have every kilogram of green coffee we purchase certified as carbon neutral. We're committed to making coffee greener.
Great. So thank you so much, Alejandro, for joining us today. So I would like, it would be great. Can you are you with us, Alejandro?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
can you
great.
hear me?
Yes, I can. Somehow the video is frozen, but I can hear you.
Yes.
So can you tell us how has your process been to become carbon neutral?
Well, first of all, Carol, thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And you know, it's been more than a process; it's been a journey. It was a very interesting. It's been an interesting journey over the last five to 6 years. We started measuring our carbon footprint in 2017. We decided to do it very hands-on at the beginning. You know, just using any information that we had online and using online calculators to kind of start this journey by ourselves and really get to understand it as much as we could. Instead of just hiring outside consultants, we decided that it was a process that we had to interiorize ourselves first and learn, you know, with our team on what to do it. So we started in 2017. One of the things that we've been really focused on is not only learning for ourselves, but also sharing all that knowledge and being transparent about our footprint with our stakeholders. So in fact, in 2017, we published our first impact report, and in that report, we also included our footprint. And over the course of the years, we have, you know, improved our understanding of our carbon footprint to the point that in 2019, we actually realized that 95% of our carbon footprint was actually the green coffee that we're buying from the farmers in Latin America. So that made us realize that we not only need to become carbon neutral in scope 1 and 2, and, you know, the scope 3 that we control, but we also needed to work with our farming partners to actually reduce and hopefully get to achieve a carbon neutral supply chain as well. So in 2020, we managed to, with the help of One Carbon World, to become carbon neutral as a company. But now we have a bigger aim, which is actually by 2025 become a fully carbon neutral certified company, including our green coffee. So it's been an amazing journey, and hopefully it's a journey that will never stop. You know, every day you learn something new, and every day there's new challenges. But it's been a quite rewarding journey because it's actually made us realize that we have to work with all our stakeholders not only internally, but all our sectors on really having a greener coffee and a greener planet.
Great. So you said you were measuring your footprint, and so what kind of measures have you taken to reduce this footprint?
So in terms of our, the footprint that we control, one of the biggest learnings was, the energy that we consume, especially for the milling. We buy parchment coffee from farmers, which is kind of a seed. You have to remove the husk, and that is called the milling process. We learned that was kind of the biggest part of our own footprint, as long together with air travel. Being a company that works in 11 different countries around the world, in Asia and Australia, the US and Latin America and Europe, air travel was a significant source. Thankfully the pandemic actually helped us get there, and we've learned that we don't need to do as much travel. But the other one is the clean energy that we use for the milling process, and that's something that we've invested heavily. In 2019 we set up a solar panel plant in our dry mill in Colombia, which has a bigger operation, and with that we've been able to reduce our energy consumption by almost 50% in the last couple of years. And apart from that, we also decided that we needed to buy more efficient equipment. The equipment that we had was good, but it was not very energy efficient, so we decided to buy much energy efficient equipment, and that has also helped us reduce our footprint. And then of course, one of the other things that we're really focused on as well is trying to buy as much as local input, not just the coffee that of course is bought locally, but we also are trying to buy as much more local inputs instead of having to import products from India, or from the US, or from the Philippines, for example. So we're tackling everything. But as I said before, I think the biggest challenge that we have is actually really getting to farmers to improve their farming practices, to make them more sustainable, and actually helping them reforest, because we're not going to get this just by reducing the carbon footprint. As mentioned by Miguel, coffee has a lot of inputs and also uses a lot of water, and that's something that we can reduce, but hopefully not entirely. So we really need to work together with our farmer partners to actually do a lot of reforestation projects and understand much better how to do carbon sequestration in the soil, so regenerative agriculture. So it's as I said before, it's a journey, and it's something that we'll continue to work together with our farming partners, and hopefully also with our roasters and every one of our stakeholders, to actually continue to reduce that carbon footprint and hopefully become a carbon positive company in the very near future.
Thank you very much. And if we have time for one last question, did you want to say a message that you would like to send to a company that wants to act and follow some of your journey?
Sure. As I said, it's a journey, and it's something that you don't need to start big. I think it's better to start small. We started small, very small project, and it's become a huge part of what we are today. But if you start small, start to identify the low-hanging fruit, things that are relatively easy to do, because when you get early wins, and they don't have to be huge wins, just early, low-hanging fruit wins, you get a lot of buy-in, not only from external stakeholders, but also from your employees and your own internal stakeholders, and that really creates movement and progress that is much easier to have in the future. So if anything, I would recommend just starting this journey, learn as much as you can, and then as you go by, start to get those small wins that help you, really improve over the course of the journey.
Right. Thanks a lot, Alejandro. So yeah, you have to do a small step first, and then gets the ball rolling. So thank you. And now we have some more inspirational stories from 3 other companies. So we are going to see those videos, and then we move to the Q&A. So keep posting questions, please. Thank you.
In 2019, Tambuzi became the first flower farm in the world to sign up to the UN's Climate Neutral Now initiative, We were also the first company in Kenya. Since then, we've been joined by many other farms and businesses. In partnership with One Carbon World, we measured and took ownership of our carbon footprint. We've offset unavoidable Scope 3 emissions and are now working with other flower farms to invest in new carbon offset projects here in Kenya. As a country, Kenya has achieved an impressive 92% renewables on grid. The foundation of our economy is natural capital, whether it's coffee, tea, flowers, vegetables, and of course our world-famous tourism. As farmers, we benefit from incredible year-round sunshine on the equator. And as farmers, we know the urgent need to become stewards of our environment, to maintain and improve our natural assets for the benefit of future generations. At Tambuzi, our focus now is on our soil. We use worms and biochar to improve its structure, organic matter and carbon content. Soil management helps us to grow some of the world's most beautiful roses, bringing happiness to our customers and making us proud of the way we farm.
Hello, I'm Duncan Farrington. Welcome to our family farm in Northamptonshire, where we produce Farrington's Mellow Yellow Rapeseed Oil. We are very proud to be certified carbon neutral. We worked with One Carbon World to measure our carbon footprint, which we had reduced through practices such as reduced cultivation and fertiliser use and installing solar panels. We offset the remainder through a One Carbon World grant. Our biggest achievement is increasing our soil carbon content, although this is not currently counted towards our carbon neutrality. We are now a UK case study for agri-capture CO2 looking to change this, by looking at how soils can be evaluated at scale to accurately measure soil carbon content, with an ambition to create an internationally trusted and verifiable certification to help land managers improve soil health, creating a financial and moral incentive to manage land for the huge potential from carbon sequestration.
Great, so we start now the question and answer session with the panelists. So first, some questions for everyone. So please, any panelists, you can jump in and answer the question. So the first one is, what's the importance of agriculture and horticulture as part of the solution to tackle climate change?
I can go first. You heard a number of people mention there that actually the soil profile is going to be our big importance for the future. One of the things we've been looking at now is actually really what generative or regenerative options we've got to actually really create a soil bank and a soil network for the future for wildlife farming business all over the world. That's going to be our future of our carbon sink, should we say, for the future, and actually really working with farmers who have got some long-term crops in the ground, the perennial crops in the ground that actually are all over the world, and actually how they're going to really drive some of these new carbon neutrality plans for the future. So it's going to be extremely important that we do everything we can to look after that, from coffee to citrus to asparagus to the simple bean crop in the last 12 weeks in the ground. So really, really important.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Yeah, so the focus on soil health, which is also beneficial for the farm itself, is really something that we hear from farmers is hugely important, and definitely is part of the solution, is one of the biggest levers in terms of climate change solution. There is a question from a little flower farm, so I think that's also for you. So we are a little flower farm looking to reduce our carbon emissions. Where should we start?
Well, we partner up with a number of little flower farms everywhere, all over the world. So my first port of call would be to contact your market, understand what your market is wanting. Somebody will be involved in that supply chain that really will be able to guide you and help you along the way. Help you start to look at where you are on scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. But also, if you've got a future, and I think Ed mentioned it earlier on, if your vision is right as a little flower farm or a big flower farm, as long as everybody's going in the same direction of your flower farm and everybody's collectively working together in it, then every little flower farm makes a difference. So contact the market, get involved with some of us, and we'll help those ones that we've been on the journey already. We'll help take those other ones with us.
Thanks a lot. So another question for everyone. How do you engage your staff? As we all have a role to play in this transformation.
Yeah, I can jump in there. So I mentioned, I might have alluded to earlier to the fact that we're a very values-led business, which obviously puts us on a good foot when it comes to internal engagement. So we set up a little green team here a couple of years ago, and that was about celebrating awareness days and generally driving internal engagement, because it has to start from the heart of the business. I think the biggest thing that has kind of really helped is just having the conversation. So being values led makes it easier for us to kind of have these conversations internally. But even if you work for a business that you wouldn't assume has a role to play in encouraging climate action, it's important to have those conversations. Over the last couple of weeks, someone challenged me a couple of weeks ago to have a conversation about climate change with a different person every day, and I actually found it surprisingly easy. Not necessarily stopping people in the street. Everyone's got their business to go about, and I probably wouldn't start off on a good note just stopping people like that. But when I'm making a coffee, getting water, or any situation I found myself in, it has not been difficult just to start those conversations. If you find out something quite profound that's shaken your understanding of climate change, share the knowledge. It's not that difficult.
If I may add, Carol, something about that, I think, Ed is right. You need to educate your staff and make them aware of the challenges and difficulties, but also of the responsibility that we have as a business. One thing that we started to do is, we have our risk matrix, right? Every company has a risk matrix, and usually it's financial risks, or reputation risks, things like that. So we started to include environmental risk as part of our risk matrix, so that they also see that as part of the risk. It's not just, what's going to happen with the environment, what's going to happen to every one of us, and what are the risks if we don't tackle those environmental risks as well.
Yeah, great point. I think that, we've been talking about impact reporting, and companies have tend to start to report their own footprint, but then not so much what is the risk to them. And I think that's definitely an extra motivation to get, the stakeholders and staff involved in this challenge. Now we have a few questions per individual people. So we have a question for Ian. What role do you think Africa, a continent with lots to offer and potential, will play in the near future? That's a big
question, big concept. Try and take it in a few bite-sized chunks. Maggie mentioned it in her Tambuzi video and everything else there as well. Africa's got a fantastic soil base, really, really great positioning in terms of actually it was originally obviously the breadbasket of Africa in certain areas. That's going to be brilliant to regenerate that and bring that back online in many different countries. Labour and a really strong dexterous workforce, as well as actually what we see in Africa. We've got some great colleagues out there. 22,000 of them work for us. But they're absolutely amazing. We've got 300 now that are actually qualified florists that actually make bouquets every day. It's amazing that the people that we've got out there working for that. And the other one, obviously, we've got a water challenge that we have to manage within Africa, and that will be the biggest challenge for Africa going forward. How do we capture water in a controlled manner? We normally get enough water, we just get it in the wrong times of the year in the wrong places. So it's actually managing that position, but that's, you could say that for every country in the world, really, that we just got to manage where we position the water. So I think that's going to be really, really essential. That Africa will become a really big carbon farmer for the future. It's got all the potential there to really look at what we can do. The challenge it will have is actually how we transport that around the world. And also how we feed everybody in Africa as well at the same time. So the critical thing is making sure that we feed internally and externally to make sure Africa is supported all the way through.
Thanks, Ian. Next, we have a question for Ed. How is organic food supporting low carbon food chains?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first answer is, how long have you got? So I think the first thing to note is the reduced inputs that organic farming involves. So synthetic fertilizers are completely banned. And you think of the nitrogen containing compounds that are normally kind of emitted in that process. We've done away with all of those. Secondly, it's again coming down to the importance of soil in all of this. It's important to note that up until very recently, most soil research was conducted on sterilized soil samples. So we have very little idea of the magic that soil can impart to farming, to natural processes. And I think that it's important that we do start to focus on nature-based solutions and restoring natural processes to really get us out of this mess. They're the ones that have kept this balance for the last 10,000 years, kept the climate remarkably stable. It's these processes that we're now starting to see eroded by our degenerative practices. So let's restore the carbon cycle, let's restore the nitrogen cycle. And for me, organic farming is a part of the solution for that. So it's been shown that organic soils store about 25% more carbon over the long term than conventionally farmed soils. There's also about 30% more species of biodiversity found on organic farms. And when you consider that we're carbon-based beings, the clue's in the name there, biodiversity is a carbon store. So there is an argument for land sparing, and there is an argument that any system with food production at its heart, might not be in the best interest of biodiversity, but that ignores the big proviso that people need to be at the center of this solution. Like it or not, we are the dominant species on this planet. So if people aren't factored into these solutions, then we're making the problem worse. Now, there are lots of good farmers out there. Again, I hasten to add that. But for us, organic is the legal requirement. It carries that legal requirement that these producers are adhering to these beneficial farming practices. So yeah, I could go on, but I'll tell it there.
Thanks, Ed. And we hear about measuring, standardizing, certification. I think there's still a lot coming in terms of, and you mentioned environmental labels earlier, and I think we really need to have some big efforts and some initiatives to accelerate this, so that people can make the right choices as well, the informed choices. So we have another question for Alejandro. What's the best part of working with sustainable coffee producers across Latin America, especially in the Galapagos Islands? Wonder who asked this question.
Yes, we actually do buy coffee from the Galapagos Islands. We're one of the biggest buyers of coffee in Galapagos at the moment, and we're actually that's a fantastic opportunity because the Galapagos are amazing ecosystem, and I've had the pleasure of being there, and it's really wonderful and magical place. And we work with about 25 farmers there. Some of them are very, very, very conscious of the environment. Just being part of the island is a prerequisite. You can't just live in that island if you don't consider the environment. And we found that the Galapagos coffee that we source is actually climate positive. So they're already doing regenerative practices, and all the practices, or the majority of the practices that they do, are really conducive to climate positive coffee. So we're actually in the process of analyzing that project very closely, because it actually helps us understand what practices that they do in the island can help us to decrease the carbon footprint of coffee farming in other areas of the world where we work. And just to mention something that Ed said, we do work with organic farmers around Latin America, and we do find that the carbon footprint of those organic farmers is significantly lower than the carbon footprint of conventional farmers. There's a challenge, of course, with that, and that's something that we need to balance out as a company and as a society, is that unfortunately most of the organic farmers that are low carbon footprint or climate positive are producing very little coffee. And of course, when you have very low production and the price is not significantly higher than conventional coffee, there is a problem that we're causing. So we're trying to solve not only the environmental issues, but also trying to solve the livelihoods of these farmers. And it's a challenge, and that's, I think, where education and awareness to consumers really will help. We've started putting the carbon footprint of each one of the coffees that we source in the bags of jute bags that we sell. That message gets across to the roasters, but then we need to amplify that message also to consumers, which generally are not, unfortunately, willing to pay a lot more money for organic coffee or for any organic products. And that's a huge challenge that we need to start addressing as well. And that's through awareness, to education, and also more companies really understanding the challenge and really all trying to work collaboratively. Because I think, and Ed also mentioned that collaboration here with all stakeholders is key to really solving the challenge that we have as a society.
Thanks, Alejandro. And if I may add that, one thing that we struggle as scientists is that we know the facts and we know what is more or less impactful. It's actually not as easy as that, because, as you said, you have land, biodiversity, carbon, water, all these things sometimes trade off. And of course, the profitability and other social and economic aspects. But still, we kind of see that the systems need to change. And I think it's not, the companies really need to play their part, of course, but I think, wider organization, governments, the incentives are sometimes not right. As you said, like, why is organic, or some production that is having less of an impact on nature and meaning on us eventually, is costing more? It should actually cost less if you internalize the externalities on the environment, right? So, glad that you are taking doing some of this work. And if we just have a minute or so, I wanted to. Oh no, is that 7 minutes? Oh yeah, great. We have 7 minutes. So great. So actually, it gives me time to address something that wasn't covered yet in the questions, and I don't think we have a new round. No. So none of your businesses is livestock driven, but if you look at globally agriculture emissions, we know that a huge part is coming from livestock, so cattle and ruminants and the manure. So maybe it's just Ed who is dealing with some livestock farmers. And it would be great if you could tell us a bit about it, because we've talked about fertilizers, which is one of the big sources as well, but cattle farming and this is difficult because we don't want to tell them stop and change your job. Like, how do you see that? Have you been talking to farmers, or how do you deal with it in your company?
I'm really glad that question came up, because it's a topic that I never get tired of talking about. I think it's a very important one to raise in any discussion around climate action. So we work with some great mixed farmers, some great livestock farmers, and it is important to note that about 70% of the UK's land area is currently cultivated. It's about the most amount of land we can farm we already do. So we need to look at really beneficial ways that we can use those, we can kind of fortify those ecosystems. Now, there are few better ways of feeding, watering and pruning a grassland ecosystem than by adding a ruminant animal. Whether we eat them or not, that's another discussion entirely. But ruminants are very good at improving the biodiversity and the carbon sequestration potential of grassland. So when we're talking about about reducing meat in our diets, it's not just for our own benefit, but for the environments as well. But we do have to be careful that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We have some fantastic suppliers who have decades, 30 years and more worth of records of carbon storage in their soil, of carbon content in their soils. And they found that, in some cases, the carbon sequestration of their land is about 10 times more than their cattle and their machinery emits. So straight away, there's an indication that these are part of the solution. But the reality is that we do have to drastically reduce our meat intake, we're going to get it down to sustainable levels. But we do have to be very, very careful that, like I said, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because mixed farming is part of the solution for climate action. So yeah, it's a very good question, and one that I could probably wax lyrical about for a while. But ultimately, we do need to reduce the levels that we eat. But we need to make sure that less but better is the maximum that we start living to.
Yeah. Did anyone want to say something on that as well? Or? No.
I mean, I'll just add, that if you look back in history, the mixed farming, wherever it all started in any agricultural system, it was a mixed farming system. It was very balanced, from all the way around. In the field profiling, the soil profiling, everything else was all based around a mixed agricultural system. We've become monocropping in some cultures, have basically lost some of that. And we're trying to bring some of that back, even some of our bigger farming systems now, to see how do we minimize food waste, putting it into animal production, so you actually can utilize the crops off the ground as well, and trying to build back a system there. So it depends whether you look at what food waste debate, climate debate, but actually in the end of the day, Ed's quite right. It started all in a mixed farming system. It just has to be a balanced mixed farming system.
Thanks. Actually, so indeed, Ed, you mentioned that we need to reduce meat consumption. That's in regions where we overconsume meat, meaning, Western Europe, North America, parts of Asia as well already. So it's not everyone, but, we don't want also for other regions to follow this trajectory, because there's also the health benefit of not overconsuming animal-based products. Another kind of big question, probably less contentious because people find it, they can all do that, is to reduce food loss and waste. So because, if our activities have a carbon footprint and we just reduce the outputs, or we reduce the loss and weight, then we're going to reduce the overall carbon footprint and probably also improve the economics of the business. So do you want to say a few words? We just have a minute. Thank you.
Yeah, I can jump in. So, food waste is obviously something that we're taking very seriously as a business. It's pretty much the scheme was started up was that farmers was to guts down several streams. So there's a lot of ways that we make a dent on it. Even down to having a dedicated person who physically looks at what's coming off the production line, determines whether it's still good to be packed, whether it's still fit for human consumption, whether we need to find an alternative use for it. Having those streams to divert waste down to, that's very, very important. But thankfully, we've always operated a wonky carrot policy. So food waste is something we've always kept.
Critical for us, Carol, just to finish off, we've set up a huge amount of food school programs. We now feed nearly 5 million children a year over 5,000 meals a day in certain areas. It basically takes the offcuts, shoots, and bits and pieces that are not to a certain specification, and we get the opportunity to use that for soups and feeding children all around our farming community. So we've taken our percentage down from 19% to 15%. It still sounds too much, and it is too much. Our target is to get to less than 10% food waste in our total supply chain. But then the farming end, we've got to try and reduce it where we can. But key projects, social projects, where we can utilise that, that's a key aspect for us.
Right, thanks, Ian. So thank you very much to all of you for sharing your insights with us, and thanks to the audience for your questions and attending. Hope you have a great rest of the COP for everyone involved, and keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.